Welcome to Real Talk, Real Estate Discussions with Andrew Kirsh. In each episode, Andrew interviews industry leaders. We'll hear their real-time opinions on today's market, their background and unique career highlights, and guidance for newcomers into the industry. You can find this show at sklarkirsh.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Now here's the host of Real Talk, Andrew Kirsh.
Episode 36 of Real Talk. As I record today on October 19th, the 10-year treasury is just about 5%. Continuous disruption in the capital markets, yet at the same time, there are deals that are closing, mostly private capital, syndication deals, family office deals, closed a multifamily deal in Washington State this week, suburban office here in Southern California, more multifamily in the Southwest. So deals are getting done. It's just harder to transact. And we had one construction financing of apartments in extremely well-located area. The construction lender pulled out after months of working on it. So it's definitely a challenging time. Everyone is feeling it. We're heading into the last 2 months of the year, and we'll see what lies ahead. This week we have Tim Gokhman, Managing Director of Newland Enterprises. And I was introduced to Tim a couple months ago through YPO, and Tim focuses on mass timber construction. He's got completed one fantastic project of 25 stories in Milwaukee. That's mass timber over a concrete podium. I've seen pictures of it, haven't seen it live, but it really is something to be seen. It's like the building is alive. Tim talks about mass timber, tall timber, the benefits of it. And I think you'll find it rather interesting.
Hello, welcome to another edition of Real Talk. I'm here with Tim Gokhman, founder of Newland Enterprises. Tim, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Yeah, so it's good to have you on. I'm trying to think how we met, and I feel like it's through YPO where you sent an email to the real estate network. And I forgot what specifically the message was, but I know what was drawn to me was what your company does in mass timber. So let's just start off there. And what is Newland Enterprises?
Yeah, so Newland is a fully vertically integrated real estate development firm. So we have in-house property management, asset management. As a developer, we have really focused on market rate, ground up, new construction, multifamily. Have always done a really great job of differentiating and embracing new technologies, and ultimately that led us in 2018 to ask the question: could we build a tall timber building?
So what is tall timber or mass timber? I mean, what is that for my audience who has not heard that phrase before?
So mass timber is the evolution of heavy timber buildings. And I think for people who live in coastal cities or port cities, they will have seen heavy timber buildings. And that's the older way of building, where we would take a 60, 70-year-old tree, and that would be a column or a beam. And oftentimes that would be exposed within the building. To go taller, that construction technique was ultimately replaced by concrete and steel. And very similar to electric cars, what engineers have figured out is that you can take effectively dimensional lumber in a slightly more sophisticated way that I'm describing it, but you basically glue and press it together, and you create these structural members that can achieve fire ratings equivalent to concrete and steel. And that's really what mass timber is. It's mass is short for massive timber. And so you're creating large pieces of wood with younger growth forest. And the technology is amazing because it has so many benefits over traditional construction methodology. And frankly, the construction industry hasn't innovated in decades.
And so when did the technology first come about?
Well, so within mass timber, there are different technologies. So there's glulam, which is typically used for columns and beams, and that's been around for decades. The real advent that has allowed buildings to go taller is CLT, cross-laminated timber, and the patents go back much farther, but really it was popularized about 25, 30 years ago in Austria. They really broke through, and so the Austrians have led in manufacturing and building for a while. It spread to Europe, then spread to Canada, and the United States is catching up.
And so, what are the, I guess, advantages, and are there any disadvantages to mass timber as opposed to, I mean, traditionally, if you're constructing an apartment building, at what point is a structure going to be steel? How many levels?
So usually, and we're predominantly a multifamily developer, though we've also looked at office and hospitality. But usually in multifamily, we're comparing against concrete. So once a building gets over, and there is a middle ground where we use light gauge steel. So Newland calls itself construction technology agnostic. We've built with stick frame, right, 2x4s. We've built with light gauge steel, which allows you to go over 84 feet and up to 180 feet. We built with concrete. Where we see the sweet spot for mass timber is the industry will say 12 to 18 story range. We see it as north of that and up to ascent is 25 stories. Really, our engineering is good for 420 feet. So really the economic advantage of mass timber is when you can substitute concrete out. Because concrete is heavy and concrete is imprecise and it's dirty. And so there's comparability on economics. There's huge advantage on speed. There's a massive advantage on aesthetics because you can expose the mass timber and it's a beautiful, absolutely stunning built environment. And then a bunch of other benefits like sustainability, reduction in labor force, et cetera.
And so what is the appetite for mass timber, or what are the reactions, I guess, from, we'll start, I guess, with insurance companies.
Well, insurance companies are a whole separate animal. Insurance is probably one of the biggest problems with mass timber. And so, when you talk about engineering and optimization and what is the kind of evolution of this, well, mass timber is relatively new, and insurance companies build their product on actuarial tables, and actuarial tables require data points. So there aren't a lot of data points. And people mistakenly think that the data points that are needed are more buildings being built. No, it's more buildings failing. That's what insurance companies want to see. They want to see failures. So we would like to very much not be a part of their data set. But that's one of the biggest challenges with insurance companies. There are ways to solve it. You can do a captive, you can do a bunch of different solutions, and people are working on it. But certainly there's just this, well, we don't know what it is and how it works. And so tall timber will face premiums that are significant from the insurance industry.
So your premiums are higher than if you were to go with concrete?
For the time being, yes, it's specific to tall timber and it's specific to certain configurations of tall timber. So I sit on the woodworks board, and it's one of the problems that we're working on right now. It's very much solvable in the next, I think, 2, 3, 4 years.
What about other parties within a development? So we talked about insurance. What about the capital markets and investors, both the institutional equity and well, let me ask you sort of a broader question first. How do you capitalize your projects? Is it with institutional equity, or is it syndication, friends and family, and beyond?
To date, we have mostly done syndication. We're about to start conversations with, let's call it institutional equity or sophisticated family offices. And so we'll find out. But what I can tell you is that, we've been hearing about sustainability or ESG for a long time. And to me, it feels like we've been talking about it for a long time. We are about to switch Ascent from a construction loan to perm. And it's the first time in the quote deck that I saw an ESG fund, and they were competitive. And so I think it's becoming more and more important. I think states like California usually lead the way for the United States. And now you have mandatory embodied carbon reduction. And honestly, to have conversations about decarbonizing the real estate industry, which has a huge carbon footprint, and to only talk about operating carbon and to not talk about embodied carbon is a problem. And so mass timber is a very potent solution in that respect. So I think we'll continue to see more interest from private and institutional equity as this material becomes more mainstream.
Mm-hmm. And then what about from lenders?
Yeah, we capitalized Ascent in 2020. And so it's really hard to say, 2020 was just such chaos. It's really hard to say whether it helped or hurt. What I can tell you is that at this point, having set a world record and having had the acclaim that Ascent has had, we call any major financial institution, chances are they've either already heard of Ascent and they're curious about it, or it's a really neat way to start a conversation. It's compelling because it's such a differentiator, right? Like, you've got a sea of buildings that are frankly pretty similar out there, especially multifamily. All the product is starting to look the same. And so differentiation has so much value.
All right, so let's talk about that project Ascent. So, where is it? How big is it? Let's get into this particular project.
Ascent is a mass timber concrete hybrid. It is the tallest mass timber structure in the world. For now, that record will be broken in very short order.
And so how tall and how many stories?
25 stories tall, 284 feet. It is 19 stories of mass timber over a 6-story concrete podium. And then the cores are also concrete. So hence the mass timber hybrid.
Mm-hmm. And so how long? Well, let's start at the entitlements phase. Yep. So this is in Milwaukee, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How was it getting approvals to build mass timber versus a traditional high-rise apartment building?
Well, it takes longer because it never been done before in the United States, right? So there are multiple thresholds to cross. 84 feet is one for fire ratings. Then in the code, if it's been adopted in your state, typically 12 stories is one breaking point, 18 stories is the next. Wisconsin was on 2015 IBC, so there were basically no tall timber provisions. But there is a provision called alternative means and methods. Basically, if you can scientifically show that you can achieve the needed fire resistance that's comparable to concrete and steel, that's a path that the city can, but is not obligated to take. So we asked the city of Milwaukee the question in March of 2018. We broke ground in fall of 2020. A lot of people will say, oh my goodness, that's really, really quick. But the reality is now that we've done this testing, right? We're the only team that has done the engineering and built a building taller than 12 stories of exposed mass timber in the United States. So now that we have that science, and we did 14 different char tests with the Forest Lab and the U.S. Forest Service, and that data is publicly available to everybody now. But now that we have that conversation should be cut in half.
And so that's on the development side, and then what about, the pre-development side, and how long did it take to build?
We started realistically October of 2020, and we finished in 2 phases. We delivered the first half of the building in the middle of July 2022, and full occupancy September 1st. Okay, so about 23 months, which is 3 to 4 months faster than it would have been in concrete, and that's measurable savings.
And how about the cost?
We think we paid about a 6% premium versus what concrete is. And everyone asks this question, right? Like, how does it compare to concrete? And the answer is really complicated because concrete is hyper local. So the answer depends on when and where you ask me. Milwaukee concrete is really, really affordable. California concrete is really, really expensive. And then everything in between, and it's not intuitive where it's expensive and where it's affordable.
Yeah. So talk about the tenant side and the types of reactions, because I've seen the pictures, you've shown me the deck, and it looks outstanding. From a tenant perspective, what are their reactions, and how much is a comparable unit leasing out for in Milwaukee in your building compared to new construction, similarly located, similar amenities? What's the rent differential?
So the reactions are visceral in a very positive way. And if you've seen the pictures, they just don't do it justice. And this is literally from every person that has seen the deck and seen the pictures and visited the building. I ask the question all the time, right? Does the deck do a good job? And we have high quality photos, we have great video, and people are like, no, nothing comes close to experiencing the real thing. And so the cool thing about mass timber is that it literally makes people feel a certain way. And this isn't like us marketing it, right? There's a science behind this. It's called biophilia. It's been studied for decades. And it is the study of how natural elements within the built environment make people feel and perform. And the simple answer is better. And this isn't just apartment buildings. This is hospitals understand this, institutions understand this. It's a real thing. So the feedback is absolutely incredible. Honestly, I go into that building so often and I give so many tours, and every time I go into it, it's magical. It really is, if it's exposed. In terms of how it compares to other buildings, Milwaukee's a smaller market. There's only one other high-rise that was built before us that's new in Class A. There's two other high-rises going up.
Sure.
But we are definitely the watermark. And it's difficult to parse out, right, how much of that is the mass timber and how much of it is the way that we designed our amenities, which we believe are superior, and multiple other things. So in multifamily, I think that data is the most difficult to extract. How much is there a mass timber premium, first and foremost, and then, well, how much? And so we've got some data points that are starting to come in as the building has lived for a year, and I think as it continues going, we'll see it. But people think about premiums right away. They think about like, well, what's the rent premium? There are other premiums, right? There's retention, there's lease up, there's free marketing, benefits on refi, cap rate compression on the exit. So you really have to be. You have to look at the whole picture when you're thinking about what is the value created with this product.
And so what's next, both for your company, Mass Timber? Before you even ask that or answer that, I guess to provide both me and my audience just sort of an understanding, how many Mass Timber projects are already in existence, and how many do you know is in the pipeline of actively being constructed?
So there's a really cool chart on the Woodworks website. It might be on WIN, which is their Wood Innovation Network. And it tracks the number of mass timber projects. Right now, remember, there's a difference between mass timber projects and tall timber projects. So the kind of household name in real estate development and the gold standard is Hines. And Hines pioneered mass timber for office buildings with their T3 concept, starting in Minneapolis and now building it all over the United States, Canada, and now across the world. So the demand, it's a hockey stick. It literally is a hockey stick. It's exponential growth. And it's not just, your kind of traditional, what you would think, if I tell you like Google is interested in it and has built buildings, okay, makes sense. Microsoft makes sense. But Adidas's new headquarters, Estee Lauder, Robinhood, Walmart built half their campus out of mass timber. So the demand is coming from everywhere. And it really is, I compare it to Tesla a lot. It's just a superior product. It's not a wholesale replacement for concrete and steel. Those materials still very much have a part to play in the construction industry, but mass timber has so many advantages in my mind as an industry. In the next decade or two, it becomes a dominant material when architects and builders are looking at how to build. And so for us, what that means is more Ascents. We've realized that, and this was a happy accident. We didn't actually meet to set a world record when we designed Ascent. We started at 19 stories and then upsized it to 21, then to 23, then to 25. And we were simply looking to balance the economics. And so what we ended up doing was we created what we now realize is a product, not just a building. And so because the engineering is so repeatable, and there's so much digital design with mass timber, we are now able to take all the lessons learned and much of the design at Ascent and replicate it in other markets very, very quickly. And that's what we're working on now.
So what are some of those lessons that you learned?
Oh man, we could spend an hour on that. I mean, no kidding. Right? You have to switch the mindset. Going back to EVs, right? Tesla rethought the entire manufacturing supply chain, methods of manufacturing. They built a new plant for production, right? The legacy automakers are taking battery packs and dropping them into existing frames with existing UX and existing wiring. It just doesn't work well. And so you really have to start from scratch. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of saying, oh, I have this concrete design or I have the steel design, switch it to mass timber. It doesn't work well. You really have to start from scratch. Now, the problem is that there's still real estate deals. So you also need real estate development fundamentals to control. And so I always joke that new land was big enough and good enough to try tall timber, and small enough and naive enough to try tall timber. And you really, you have to have that sweet spot. So lessons learned, I mean, the vast majority of it is on construction methodology and optimizing the design. The challenge with mass timber is this type of building doable? The big questions are, is it doable economically? Can you make the numbers work? And that's where I think a lot of chips fell our way. I think that, any major achievement always has a strong component of luck in it. And so we tried to do the best we could and ended up with really excellent teams, both on the construction side and the design and the architectural side. And so from simple things like water management on site to logistics, to selection of the mass timber manufacturer, and so on. I literally, we could spend an hour on this.
Yeah. So do you still own Ascent?
We do.
Mm-hmm. And you've refied?
We're just about to pull the trigger on a perm.
Okay.
And so we've talked about, this is one of my blind spots. You alluded to institutional capital. It's like, well, do we want to take Ascent and put it into a DevCo and use it to seed other Ascents? And so that's the math we're going through right now. But Ascent is literally and it has so much data inside of it because we have access control systems that tell us how the building is living and breathing, that it really informs what future Ascents will do and frankly what future of mass timber holds.
But is that beyond just the mass timber, or when you're saying of how the building is when you use the phrase that of how the building is doing or how the building is performing from like a systems perspective, is that beyond mass timber and there's other technologies within Ascent, or you're saying of how the mass timber is literally holding up?
That's a very astute observation. So it's beyond mass timber, right? And people ask us, well, is the solution just that it's a mass timber building? No. Ascent is really special because it's the intersection of biophilic design, which mass timber drives, but also experiential design. And that's a combination of technology and finishes and amenities. And so it's to create a superior product, everything needs to be superior. You can't just say, oh, it's a mass timber building, therefore it's superior. Nope, the amenities have to be superior, the finishes have to be superior, the resident experiences have to be superior, everything. And so that's where the access control is really helping us, is to understand how amenities round out the experience at Ascent.
Mm-hmm. So I've seen your deck, and we're having this conversation. Walk me through the conversations you're having with investors who are curious to trying to poke holes. I mean, is there anything that I haven't asked you that they're really focusing on and trying to I don't know, basically disrupt what you think is really the next wave and today's and how large apartment buildings and other asset classes, other buildings, commercial buildings should be built? I mean, what are these questions that they're asking you?
Yeah, I mean, skipping past the kind of introductory questions of like how does it do in fire safety and et cetera,
Sure.
that have actually been really well thought through. There are real challenges. Like, what do you do with the supply chain, right? The timber for Ascent came from Austria. Are you going to keep using Austrian suppliers for the time being? The answer is probably, but we prefer to use North American suppliers. But there's a balance between, quote unquote, buy local and lower that carbon footprint, and also have the best in class execution. For the moment, best in class execution still seems to be in Austria, but the United States is catching up quick, right? That's one question. And so, is there logistics risk when you're shipping it via containers? Like, look at what happened in 2021 in the Suez Canal, right? Yes, there's some additional logistics risk. It doesn't mean it can't be overcome, but back to the team. You have to have a team that really knows everything inside and out about every aspect of it to be able to handle that liability, right? Insurance is another one. It's a relatively new technology. So how do you make sure that the knowledge you have in Milwaukee that you developed with this construction team, how does that scale to Denver and Seattle and Atlanta and Nashville and et cetera? So there's, there are a ton of questions around it. I feel like we've been working on this for the last 5 years. And so we've been asked these questions so many times, we've thought through the solutions. But the most important thing is, and where I think a lot of development teams fail, the engineering is not good enough and the team is not good enough.
Mm-hmm. And so what markets are you looking at for the next Ascent?
Denver is top of mind for us. We've identified a partner that we would really love to work with there, and hopefully we're very, very close. It's a mix. It's a combination of there are markets that we just really like and are intuitive. Denver, Seattle, I mentioned Atlanta, maybe some markets like Charlotte, Raleigh, maybe Salt Lake. But then there are also markets with really great partners. And I think that great local partners, right? As Sam Sells said, like all real estate is local. Same thing with Hines. Really great partners make a huge difference. And we do not want to suffer from the hubris of saying, oh, we're going to go to a new market and figure it out. And so part of the strategy very much relies on finding a family office or a real estate developer that has a good understanding of what the local market wants and needs, coupled with our expertise of how do we design and program a world-class mass timber high-rise.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's this technology has so many benefits, like you talked about, from aesthetics to reducing the carbon footprint to the tenant enjoyment. And then hopefully, because obviously all investors measure success through economics from either an IRR perspective or cash flow perspective. Do you envision Newland getting into other asset classes besides multifamily with this tech, with mass timber?
Yeah. So the way that I look at it is from a structural standpoint, and even from an economic standpoint, I think office is the easiest to figure out. I think hospitality is very intuitive, right? If you're thinking about premiums, like if you want to charge an extra $100 a night, how many times are you traveling to a city that will have a mass timber hotel? And if you want to spring for that experience and pay an extra $50, $100 a night, that's easy to justify, right? For an office tenant, they have very different economics. For a renter that's cutting that check every single month, that's a little bit of a different story. And so from a structural engineering standpoint, because apartments have irregular, right, demising walls and spans, And from an economic standpoint, we chose. It chose us. We're in the multifamily industry, and so we did what we know. But now that we see that we can make it work in multifamily in Milwaukee, we feel like we can make it work in most any other city for multifamily, and certainly we can translate that knowledge to hospitality, to office.
So you're saying Frank Sinatra was wrong when he's saying, if you could make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. It really should have been, if you can make it in Milwaukee, you can make it anywhere.
I think it's industry by industry.
All right. Well, Tim, I hope our listeners have learned about mass timber, and that if they're looking to partner up with you in any way, that they can find you at Newland Enterprises. And I know this is a technology that I'm sure is going to be widespread in the short years to come. No different, like you're saying, in the automotive industry, of at least in LA, where we see Teslas like they're a Honda. They're all over the place, and so it would be great to see this type of construction technology really grow.
Agreed.
Yeah. So Tim, look, thank you for coming on to the show, and I'm sure we'll see each other at upcoming YPO events. And best of luck.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Andrew.
All right, Tim. Take care.
You too.
You've been listening to Real Talk, Real Estate Discussions with Andrew Kirsh. You can catch prior episodes at sklarkirsh.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and for sharing the show with others.